wanted to do a pattern with some bigger bags so I could have my phone and some other stuff with me at the Ren Fair. But I thought, why not just make 3 different sizes? So we have a large, 9 inches I think. I think this one's 8, which is the medium, and the small is 7 inches across. I also decided to do some options with this, so if you want it simple, slide your belt through there. Or this, so sometimes you have a lot of stuff on your belt. You don't want to take your whole belt and everything off of it to slide this on where you want it. You can just pop this on and off at any time, plus pop it off, and you can throw any shoulder strap on there so you have a shoulder bag. I like options. Another thing you can do, this gusset can be sewn on any way you want. If you don't want to stitch it like that, you can just put the 2 sides in or out. And this panel, I did 2 layers, so this one itself has a separate little pocket since this is 2 layers, this piece. Put cards or cash or something in there. I hope you like them. Cut your parts out just outside the line. That way when we tape these down to the leather, we'll still be able to see that line we need to cut the leather out on. Makes it a little easier to get it nice and accurate. I'm using a 6-ounce veg tan. For the back and the front, the billets will be this. And for the gusset and the front part of the pouch itself, I'm using a chrome tan. I believe this is a 4 ounce. This is a 4-ounce chrome tan. You can do a veg tan for the gusset and the front of the pouch as well. The pattern will work either way. But you just tape your pattern parts down to your leather, whichever leather it is you're using. And for this pouch, I'm going to be actually leaving the flesh side out. I like the color and the feel of that better of that side. Just make sure every edge has a piece of tape going over it, but all the holes as well. And sometimes with the bigger parts, I'll put some tape across it just so the paper doesn't twist and stretch too much. It just helps keep it a little bit straighter. As far as the stitching holes, I usually go with my 0.8 millimeter hole punch. You can use a stitching chisel, whatever you prefer. And you'll notice that hole with the mark on it will line up. There's one other hole like that on that back panel. So that'll just let you know where the stitches start. And you always want to flip it and cut away from an internal corner. If there's any spot sticking, don't pull it. You're going to create these little frays from the leather. Go back, and if it's giving you any trouble, just peel the paper off first and try to see if it's sticking anywhere. I like to just cut these straight and use a penny or something. And then you can adjust this curve if you want it a little wider or narrow. You could even just leave them straight like that, but I prefer some kind of curve on these. I'm keeping an eye on the blade too. I don't want to tip it one way or the other at all. Try to keep it as straight up and down as I can. These two parts can be sewn together pretty much any way you want. Just put the seams together and sew a standard saddle stitch, or you can do something like what I did here. This is how I sew a lot of my sheepskin stuff. And on top of that, with this one, I did 2 threads and just go down a little ways with the one and then continue behind with the other. You can also do it like I do my sheepskin stuff, where you just tie a knot in the end of this and start on one end, go all the way around, and then all the way back again. Pretty much any way you want to sew these. It can help to throw some clips on here as well. I'll just start that and throw the excess to the inside. So on this end, I'm going to go straight over the top, and if you've seen any of my sheepskin stuff, you'll know exactly what I'm doing here. That just locks those 2 layers together, but I'll also go around over the top of the seam before I continue down. And you'll notice I started on that second stitch from the inside, and that's so when I go all the way down and come back, I'll actually end here instead of right on the end. Makes it a little easier to tie and hide that knot to the inside. I take a look and make sure that's about a 90-degree angle, those 2 stitches. As I'm going, I make sure they cross right on the top of the seam. So now you can see that whole end is done to there. So when I come back, it'll be real easy to hide this knot. And I'll just make sure it's even, not further one way or the other, so it comes across nice, snug. And you can throw a clip behind here if you find your stitches are loosening up on you. One of the things I do is wax this thread. Since I usually hand stitch with a machine thread, I'll throw some wax on it. This is just a mixture of beeswax and paraffin, I believe. I'll throw the needle through those 2 corner holes just to make sure they're lined up. I got to the corner, threw a clip on there, and now it works a little bit better if you just splay that gusset out. And you can mark those center marks and line them up just to help make sure all the holes are lined up a little bit better. What I usually do is just grab this next hole and start clipping with that needle being straight through. Keep an eye on your stitches. Try to make the tension the same with each stitch so you don't get any pulling harder than the others. The more uniform everything looks, the cleaner and nicer this project will end up. That's the last stitch. Be careful not to overly wrench on it. So go through this hole a second time. You can either go around this side or the top, but we'll be doing both. So I'll just go around the top first, and then the second time I'll just go over the seam. And then, I mean, technically you can stop. I would do an extra stitch if you're just doing that single loop around each side, just like how I have it. But at this point, I am going to go all the way back. So it's just all the way straight back. Being that it's already sewn through once, it's a whole lot easier on the way back. The only thing is to make sure it crosses right on top of the seam. You don't have to pull quite as hard, but you do want to pull hard enough so that it matches the tension of the previous row of stitches. So with this last stitch, Instead of coming through both layers, I'll just pop in between here. And that will finish off that seam. And since we started back a little bit, that knot will be hidden down there a little more. If you didn't get that hole that was marked onto here, you can grab the pattern and get those holes marked. That'll be that first hole that this gusset starts on. And I'm going to put the good side to the back so that when these little billets come to the front and this buckle comes to the front, it'll be the nice side of the leather. And I'll start just by clipping all the way around, and I'll check to make sure those holes are lined up. And you can just skip right to the corner. And I will go over the end of that hole to tack down this edge here. The only thing to remember when you're doing a saddle stitch like this is when you're coming up, always come through the hole the same way first, and then always pull it to the same side. That way the stitches will line up correctly, otherwise they'll hop and look kind of weird. What I'm going to do for these last couple stitches, so that knot will be down in there a little bit more, is instead of coming back with that other thread, I'll just continue all the way down and then come back and meet at that hole on the inside. I just like to think, since this thread coming this way is always on this side, this one will want to try to get it on the opposite side closest to the edge here. It's not a huge deal, but every little thing you can do to make it look a little better. And then right with this one, if I can come on the other side, like I said, not crucial. So I came back down and we're meeting right here. I'll just come back in with this one to the inside. And then come through with this one. Now I can tie that knot and have it down a couple stitches so it won't be in the way. And like usual, I'll put a little dab of glue on that. Make sure when you get your buckle on that it's facing the right way. And these stitches, doesn't have to be anything specific. It's going to be hidden anyways. As long as they look nice, I wouldn't worry about it. And I'll just go with a single needle and start in between the layers from the inside. That way I can just go through a few times, tie a knot. Pretty quick and easy. You can throw a little clip on that excess so it doesn't pull through on you. So however you want to sew these will work just fine. With this last stitch, you can come through and then back out, or you can just come in between the layers, but that way your knot's in between those two layers. You can tap it with a mallet or something too, just to flatten it in there, get it out of the way. Whenever I tie knots, I go through twice. It'll hold it tight as we get the next part of that knot tied. And then you can check and even tighten a little more. And if you need to loosen it, you can just pull on one side and the other a little bit, and it'll pull that loose. but I almost always put some glue on this knot. So when you have your flap here, these ones are going to be decorative. So we'll sew those first just so it's a little easier. But these stitches are the only ones that will be sewing the two parts together. And it'll go right up to that corner. So what I'll do is just start on that corner and come around and do these decorative ones. If you wanted to, you could just not punch those holes out too. I like how it looks. I don't know if it adds much to the durability or anything, but once I got to that second to the last hole, and again, you can do it however you want. I just recommend going around the outside of the edge somehow. So I'll just go through from underneath twice so that thread goes around the outside. I may go again here. Sometimes it looks cool if you have two going around the outside, a little more reinforcement. Yeah, I'm gonna go through again. You can do these however you want. And then just continue all the way down. I'll stop one hole short. And actually, I'm going to bring this one back through in between these two layers. Whenever I can, I like to tie knots back a stitch or two. Helps just keep them out of the way. And then I'll just use this one to finish that off, go around the end, and I'll pop through and tie it to the other side. So I'll still come up the next hole as if that thread will be going back down. But I'll go across the edge twice, and you can do this however you'd like. And then I'll drop through that same hole so I can tie a knot right back in here. I like to wait on that buckle. It just gets in the way, thread gets caught on it. And you could have done this prior to, but I like to leave it off, at least until I get around here, so I'm not fighting this underneath there. I'll start somewhere like here, so when I get around and tie a little knot, it'll be underneath that billet. Might also notice I punched holes there and a stitching chisel on this. The stitches will look nicer where you see them, but by having little holes, it makes it a lot easier to sew instead of fighting through two layers of just a stitching chisel. Instead of just coming back up all the way, I'll pop in between the two layers and tie a knot here. It's nice and hidden underneath that billet. The last thing to do will be this buckle here. And it helps to just think about exactly how this wants to be laid on here. And bring that up so you know. But always check before you start sewing to make sure it's right. Same as before, the last stitch, I just come through the middle with each side. if you need to put just a dab of water where you're bending these, go for it. It can help quite a bit.